In this video, I have 6 predictions for you, 3 in English, 3 in math. I am going to be giving an example question for each prediction, and I definitely recommend that you pause the video and try each of those questions on your own first. First up, I'm guessing you're going to be able to handle rhetorical synthesis questions without reading the notes. And normally it would look something like this. All you have to do is focus on the goal. So here we want to specify the number of gray wolves in Yellowstone. So then I eliminate answers that don't specify the number. Choice A, I don't see a number. Choice B, I don't see a number. Choice C, I don't see a number. Choice D, Yellowstone is a national park that has roughly 100 gray wolves. Boom, got my answer, right? That's what it normally looks like. And just a quick spoiler alert, I'm about to show you a question that is on practice test 5. So if you haven't taken practice test 5, you might want to skip this little part right here. But I wanted to go over this real quick because a lot of people are freaking out and saying that you can't skip the notes anymore. You're going to have to read all the notes and that these rhetorical synthesis questions are going to take a lot longer. I don't think that's the case. Let me show you real quick. So the reason people have been freaking out is because of questions like this one. And to be clear, only I want to say 2 of these showed up on a couple of the practice exams, but reports from students have been mixed. Some of them are saying they've encountered questions like this on real exams, and then others are saying that's not the case. So anyway, let's talk about it. I still think we can get through these without reading all the notes. Emphasis on all. So my strategy, I look at my goal, which is to indicate the California red-legged frogs. So this frog's classification category, right? Choice A, species on this list, which includes the frog, are classified as either endangered or threat. So that's talking about all species rather than just this frog, and it's also not clarifying, so I'm going to say no. B, the California frog appears on the list as at risk. That does tell me, so I'm going to keep that one. C, according to the FWS, the California frog is in the endangered category. So again, that's telling me the classification, so I will keep that one as well. D, likely to soon become endangered. The California red-legged frog is classified as threatened by the FWS. Okay, again, it's telling me, so I'm going to go ahead and have to take a look at the notes. But I'm not going to read all the notes. I'm only going to look for a bullet point that mentions this frog, which is this last one here. It says the California red-legged frog is likely to soon become endangered. So that lines up with D, meaning B and C are false, and I've got my answer. Again, I did not have to read all the notes. This strategy still works. It might take you a tiny bit longer because you're going to have to check and see which answer is actually true, but unless you're rushing through and not eliminating like you should be, you will recognize that more than one answer works, and you'll look for specific notes that either confirm or deny whether or not those answers are true. All right, next up we have comma splices, and comma splices are one of those errors that just shows up again and again on the SAT, and it also messes with a lot of my students. Some of them just aren't aware of what they are. So let's talk about it real quick. What is a comma splice? A comma splice is when you use a comma to separate 2 independent clauses. Basically, you have a comma that is cosplaying as a period or a semicolon. Periods and semicolons are allowed to separate independent clauses. Commas are not. That is a comma splice. It is bad. Don't do it. Don't choose it as your answer. Now that said, take a look at this question and try it on your own first and see if you could spot what I'm talking about. Yep, I'm looking at B. So starting from our main sentence and actually getting rid of this introductory phrase as well, we have Saville is not the protagonist of Shelley's novel. As the recipient of the letters that frame the book's narrative, she's the occasion of it. So you can see we have 2 full sentences there. So a comma would be a comma splice. For that reason, we could also get rid of A, because if you have 2 full sentences, you need some sort of punctuation, right? We either need a period or we need a semicolon. We do get a semicolon in choice C, but we also have the addition of rather. So what does rather do? It's just adding an additional introductory phrase to that independent clause, so that's fine. D would also be a comma splice. So for that reason, our answer is C. And I've actually got a bonus tip for you, which is to boop that like button for me. Next up, we have graphs and tables in the English section, which I think is a bit rude. Maybe keep those in the math section. Anyway, what we need to do is we need to feel our way through these questions. The F in feel being find out whether you are supporting or weakening, the hypothesis, the conclusion, the assertion, whatever. In this case, it says we are supporting the assertion. So that means we're ready to move on to the first E in feel, which is to express the hypothesis or claim in your own words. And I do see the last sentence here, which is usually where it ends up being. The team assert that countries in each region reported effects on provisioning services. Okay. So each region reported provisioning services, and that provisioning services represent the majority. So they're reporting provisioning services, and that these are the majority of the services that are reported. So in my own words, maybe something like all regions reported PS for provisioning services and majority. Just kind of simplifying things for myself. All right, the next E is to eliminate. I'm going to eliminate answers that don't line up with my version of this. A, provisioning services represent 73% of all services reported from West region, and 33 of those reported from Central, but 75 overall. Okay, so that doesn't mention all regions. It mentions the West region and the Central region, so I'm going to eliminate A. B, none of the percentages shown for PS are lower than 33. Okay, that's good, because if it says none of them are lower than 33, that means that all regions would have had them reported, and the overall percentage for provisioning services is 75%, which we can infer is a majority. We might want to check with the graph or the chart. We might want to check with the table, but let's see if we can eliminate before we do that. C, provisioning services are shown for each region, while no cultural services are shown. So that mentions all regions, but it doesn't have any sort of number that would indicate it being a majority, so C is out. D, the greatest percentage shown for provisioning services is 88 for the North region, and the least is 33 for the Central. Again, doesn't show all of the regions. So by process of elimination, my answer is B, and I did not even have to look at the table, which I think is fantastic. And in case you were curious, the L in feel is to look at the graph or the table, but a lot of the time that step becomes unnecessary because eliminating based off of that hypothesis or assertion is usually enough to take care of it. I did make a dedicated video on this if you want to check it out. I'll try to remember to link to it up in the corner somewhere here. All right, next up, we've got the circle equation. And this is going to be one example of how the circle equation can show up. Just keep in mind there are other ways. The key is if you know what the circle equation is, it's going to make questions like this one a lot easier and faster. So let's review that real quick. Our circle equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And importantly, we need to know that hk, the point hk, where h is x and k is y, is going to be the center of our circle. And importantly, r is going to be the radius. So with this in mind, let's take a look at this question, and I'll show you two ways that we can solve it. One way is fast, and the other way is really fast. So the first thing we can do is actually just plug in one of these points, and I'll show you what I mean. So if we grab our calculator, and let's say we want to plug in that first point, 2, 4, we just put that into our equation. So we would get 2 minus 2 squared plus 4 minus 9 squared, and it tells us what r squared is, right? 25. So by doing that, we know that r squared is 25, right? R squared is 25. We square root both sides, and then all of a sudden r is 5, and we have our answer. Pretty quick. But there's actually an even faster way to do it. At least it would be faster for me. It tells us that the diameters, endpoints, are 2, 4, and 2, 14. Because they're both on 2 on that x coordinate, we know the actual distance of the diameter is the difference between 4 and 14. So basically, the diameter is 10, meaning the radius is 5. So that's another way that you can just kind of do it in your head. And again, this all comes from being familiar with that circle equation. By the way, at the time that I'm recording this, I am accepting new students. So if you want to work one-on-one with me, go ahead and use the link in the description to sign up for private tutoring. Speaking of things you want to be comfortable with, you want to be comfortable with the exponent rules, the exponent tricks and shortcuts, because exponents in one form or another are going to be showing up on the SAT. And if you're comfortable with the rules, you can get through these quickly. Now, again, this is just one example of how a couple of those rules might help you out. So keep that in mind. All right, try this on your own first, but let's get into it. First thing I like to do when we have exponents equaling each other and they don't look like each other is to get them to look like each other. So I'm noticing that on the right side here, we actually have this fractional exponent where we have, roots or radicals on the left side. So what I can do is I can rewrite the left side. Since I know more about the left side, I actually have numbers on the left side. I'm going to rewrite that in fractional exponent form, that form on the right. And the rule here is if you have, I'll use a over b for example. If we had x to the a over b, that would be the same as the b root of x to the a. So what you have is the numerator stays with the base underneath the radical sign. The denominator goes in the little divot here. So that's what we're going to do as we rewrite these other ones. So using that rule, the square root, because remember, if there's nothing here, there's basically an invisible 2. The square root of x to the 5 would be the same thing as x to the 5 divided by 2. Again, the exponent becomes the numerator, and then whatever number's in that little divot there, there's a cool name for the divot, but I always forget what it is. Anyway, whatever number's in the divot there becomes our denominator. And because there's nothing, that means there's an invisible 2. And then down here, we have x to the 4 divided by 3. X to the 4 divided by 3. Again, divot, denominator, exponent, numerator. Cool. So now this is starting to look more like the right side, right? Let's make this even closer, because on the right side, we don't have a fraction at all. So how do we get rid of this fraction? Well, another exponent rule is when you divide exponents with the same base, in this case, the base is x, right? It means we're subtracting the exponents. So this is the same thing as x to the 5 over 2 minus 4 over 3. We're going to need a common denominator in order to subtract these. So we'll go with 6, since 2 times 3 is 6. So since we're multiplying 2 by 3, we multiply 5 by 3, and we get, I'll go down here for this, we get 15 over 6. Since we're multiplying 3 by 2, we multiply 4 by 2, and we get 8 over 6. And then 15 minus 8 is 7, so then our result is 7 over 6. And we do have the x here, right? So it's kind of our final thought here is this has been converted into x to the 7 over 6. And if x to the 7 over 6 equals x to the a over b, we can get rid of our x's. 7 over 6 equals a over b. So that is our answer, 7 over 6. And sticking with the things you should be familiar with theme, you should be familiar with the forms of quadratics, because questions dealing with those forms of quadratics are going to be showing up on your upcoming exam. And again, I'll show you 2 different ways. In general, if something can be graphed, you probably want to use Desmos to graph it unless you have some other shortcut in mind. For this one, it's asking us the value of t. We know that t is one of 2 x-intercepts, right? Or I should say the x-coordinate of the 2 x-intercepts. So graphing this, if we pull up Desmos and I graph this, it's as simple as looking for those x-intercepts. One is 0, 0, like it mentions. The other one is 8, 0. And just like that, we know our answer is 8, right? So that's pretty fast. However, again, there's actually a shortcut that's even faster than that if you're familiar with forms of quadratics. Explaining this is going to take a little bit longer, but just know that if you understand the concept, this question actually happens in your head in a matter of seconds. This is in vertex form. Vertex form being y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Let me stick that down here where we can see it. And importantly, we need to know that hk is the vertex. So with that knowledge, we know that the vertex of this circle is 4, -32. And we're looking for one of the x-intercepts. Funny thing about the vertex, the x-coordinate is always right in the middle of your two x-intercepts coordinates. So if we went back to that graph, for example, you can see that the vertex is in the center of those two x-intercepts, right? Because of that, all we have to do in our head to get to one of the x-intercepts is subtract the x value and add the x value. So if we subtract it, we get 0, right? So that's where that 0, 0 comes from. If we add it, we get 8, 0. So again, we would get our answer 8 very quickly. And that would all just happen in your head in moments. For sure, you can use Desmos, but if you're still having issues running out of time, knowing shortcuts like this is going to be a huge help. If you're looking for more practice, this video right here is going to give you an hour of guided study with types of questions that show up on every single exam.